Rewind-A-Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW, lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly, as we hear from John and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads, and if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show, and if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
It is Wednesday night here at Post Wrestling. I am John Pollock alongside Wai Ting. Welcome to Rewind-A-Dynamite, where we rewind and talk about what we have just seen. Hello, Wai.
Hey, John. How you doing?
I'm doing great. You look crystal clear. This is a wonderful angle of you, and you're moving. There's motion on your side of the camera.
Yeah, let's not jinx ourselves, okay, John? We've had one good show.
Perfect broadcast coming up
a few days ago, but hopefully it manages. I think we found the issue, so hopefully I'll look and sound a lot better this time.
The other day, I went to the store to get my normal brand of decaf coffee. They were all out, so I had to buy an alternative.
You mean like the beans or the grounds, or what do you mean?
The beans, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So I bought an alternative brand, and I am nearly convinced that this decaf is mislabeled, because I had this last night. And at 2 a.m, dude, I was like, my heart was racing, dude. At 2 a.m, I was like, this feels like I have just had like worse than normal coffee. It just felt like a jolt to my system and yet I'm having it again tonight, and we're going to see. So
interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would necessarily test that. I mean, you're testing it right now, I suppose. But
I'm just telling you the way I've read. Maybe I'm just not used to this particular version of although I have had this decaf coffee before, but never have had this effect of it. I rarely get like a jolt from coffee. It's sort of just
really,
yeah. It's more so a mindset thing.
Maybe switch to tea.
I might be moving to tea, or I'll just water.
That's always a decent option.
These are the things people have tuned in to hear about right off the top. So we're going to move on from there. Did you have a good day? How was your Wednesday?
I had a pretty decent day. Yeah. I would classify it as pretty good. I didn't really go out. The weather wasn't so great, but got to stay home with my kid, and just it's always good when you can spend family time. So
okay. Well, that sounds like a wonderful day. We might be getting I think there's a frost warning for this weekend.
What else is new? I'm sure next week we'll get 15 centimeters of snow, tornadoes, whatever. Nothing surprises me anymore.
Well, maybe some of these news items will surprise you. We're going to start off with, actually, you know what? Let's just do our regular CM Punk segment. Is there anything to discuss about CM Punk? Wade Keller noting that apparently he had his meeting with Chris Jericho. We got a bit more information about how he ended up at Raw on Monday. Look at this perfect photo. That apparently he was on his way back from the CFFC show in Florida and was on the plane with several WWE talents, and then ends up going to the Allstate Arena. But that's the latest.
That is the latest on CM Punk. And
I'm just asking if you have any new thoughts, if you have anything you want to talk about, because we need to include a chapter on CM Punk. Apparently on every single show, we have to talk about this man's every movement as it pertains.
Yeah. Listen, I find him incredibly fascinating to discuss what his choices and actions are, whether it be on social media or in person. In this case, they're wonderful to just try to dissect and analyze, even whether or not there's much.
Is he rooting for the Leafs or the Lightning in this series? Who do you think he has an allegiance to?
Leafs or the Lightning? I don't know.
I can see him having like an original six affinity for the Maple Leafs over the Lightning.
Maybe, but I mean, Chicago's in the series, right? Like, who are Chicago going to face? Are they? Whatever. I don't care. I don't care about hockey.
I'm just talking about that specific series itself.
Right. Okay. Anyway, I mean, I saw a lot of discussion, a lot of debate about whether or not this is calculated, or if it's just in fact the guy deciding to go visit his friends. I still have a really hard time buying a man deciding to just suddenly go and visit his friends because it happens to be in Chicago. I mean, wrestling has been in Chicago. WWE has been in Chicago plenty of times. Was this just so convenient that he happened to get off a flight and had a direct, connection there? I guess it's possible. Anything's possible. I just find it a bit harder to believe.
I think people have that same idea that this is a guy that is, you always are looking at like, what is the play here? And I go back to what I said Monday. I think this ultimately comes down to if Tony Khan knew ahead of time or did not, and how you react as such. I would say regardless, I just think it was an odd move to make at this juncture when you are just trying to rehabilitate things with your company. And here he is going to the other company to mend fences.
Yeah. So,
I'm ready to move on. Yes.
He's got plenty of headlines coming out of this, whether or not intentional. Whatever. Let the speculation continue to begin. I believe I heard some pretty light CM Punk chants on Dynamite tonight. I don't know if you managed to catch that.
It was very brief, but they were there. Yes.
Right.
I was surprised we didn't get any on Monday because just with that story itself. And I mean, maybe there were some, but I didn't detect any Monday.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Let's talk about this lawsuit. It's a pretty significant story. This was filed by Brittany Abrahams, who was a writer with WWE from 2020 until April of 2022. She was hired on the SmackDown brand, and it is worthing. She is a Black woman, and that plays very significantly into this story. It's a civil suit that she has filed against WWE, Vince and Stephanie McMahon, and then writers Ryan Callahan, Chris Dunn, Jen Pepperman, Mike Heller, and Christine Lubrano, who's their SVP of Creative Writing Relations. They are listed on the suit, and she is making claims of discriminatory treatment, harassment, a hostile work environment, wrongful termination, and unlawful retaliation against the plaintiff due to her race, color, and gender, and does include a list of witnesses that saw several of these incidents that she alleges. So she left the company just after WrestleMania 38 last year in Dallas. And she cited several instances in the writer's room or dialogue among writers that she found to be problematic. One of them being verbiage that was written for Bianca Belair, that allegedly Bianca Belair took issue with multiple times that she did not want to say. And that was the line, don't make me take off my earrings and beat your ass. And then it was Abrahams bringing up that these are based upon cruel, ugly stereotypes of dark-skinned Black women, and that Abrahams emailed Ryan Callahan her concerns with this wording. There's other issues that were brought up here, one of which was an idea to put Reggie in drag while he was paired with Carmella, and this was discussed on a Slack channel that included the McMahons, Bruce Pritchard, Ed Koskey, the Apollo Crews character that we did see make it to air. And several of these that are, in some ways are mind-blowing, but in other ways you can not be as stunned that these ideas were thrown out there. Shane Thorne was going to have a hunting gimmick, and that it was pitched that a white Caucasian male wrestler with a hunting gimmick would hunt a Black male wrestler for fun, and that Shane Thorne would go and hunt Reggie. Quote, holding Reggie captive in cages was also discussed. And then the other story involving a love triangle between Mansoor, Aaliyah, and Angel Garza, where Mansoor would have a deep, dark secret. And when they were throwing out ideas, what could this secret be? One of the writers threw out a joke that perhaps Mansoor could be behind the 9/11 attacks, and that is the secret that he has been holding all these years.
Right.
That would be quite the secret to have held on to for all these years, and then admitted on national television as well. And that pitch was met with nervous laughter by one of the witnesses here, also a Black woman that was on the team as well. So, it's highlighting a lot of offensive stories, some of which, in the case of Apollo Crews, that's an interesting one because we debated it at the time of whether this was going to be a character that Apollo Crews was embracing, if it was going to work for him, that you are drawing upon his lineage. I think a lot of this comes down to the buy-in of the performer himself and what kind of, is this something that he is pushing for? Is this something that he is doing against his will? How does the performer feel about it? I can't say I watched that character. I'm also not Nigerian, and felt like it was, I can certainly see with the way that they presented him with the spear and such, that got into territory that was uncomfortable for some. I guess it was the accent itself and the idea that went into the character was sort of up for your interpretation, and it was panned by some, but embraced by others.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know how Apollo Crews felt about it. I also ultimately I think we should focus on like what exactly the lawsuit is about. She's suing for wrongful dismissal. Is that correct?
Right. So the issue that came out at the end is that essentially is what she is saying is that she brought up her concerns with many of these issues and sort of speaking to the culture that she absorbed during her year and a half that she was with the company. And then at WrestleMania 38, they have the collectible chairs that are there ringside, and several of the writers were going to take these chairs, and she ended up taking one, and then she was the one that was reprimanded over this, and she believed that she was the only one singled out and ended up being terminated April 7th, just days after WrestleMania, with the idea that all of these complaints, this was their out to cut ties with her over a pretty flimsy reason about taking a commemorative chair from WrestleMania. Right. But it is going to force many to examine the makeup of the writer's room, when you are writing for many different ethnicities, when you are essentially putting words in the mouth of performers, and what kind of culture does exist here. This is, I think that's also something that has been brought up in all of this, is that these are all ideas that it was sort of, these people all felt comfortable throwing out these outrageous ideas. And let's be honest, you're reading these ideas. Are there any of these that you could imagine would have made it to television at some point in WWE's history? Like,
yeah, of course,
we could go through a laundry list of stuff that does. And when
we have lived through it, like
we have lived through all of this,
Muhammad
and then
Hassan,
some. Like,
Muhammad
go through
Hassan
Muhammad
was in
Hassan,
the news.
go through like all of
fucking
this
Apollo
stuff.
Crews was a ninja like a year ago. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Or sorry. What Tozawa?
Akira Tozawa, who I mean is like very offensive character that was just sort of accepted. We can go through all of these, and that kind of comes down to like who is being written for and what is being encouraged. And are these outliers, these ideas, or is this sort of what has been developed in terms of like, these are ideas that are not only accepted, but encouraged?
Yeah. I mean, it completely puts a microscope on, I think, what we've kind of gotten used to with professional wrestling, specifically maybe WWE's version of professional wrestling, and how much it plays off of stereotypes, throughout its history. When you're talking about a company that's trying to maybe, become like a Marvel or become, I don't know, like something mainstream, that probably doesn't fly. And these sort of headlines and these sort of like ideas that are now kind of made public, that might have been discussed, whether jokingly or not, in the writer's room, are not going to fly whatsoever. And I think that's a great thing for professional wrestling. If this level of scrutiny is there that much more in the writer's room, then I think it makes it that much more difficult for, something like an Apollo Crews character to show up in the future, or Akira Tozawa showing up as a ninja again in the future, whether or not the performers themselves might have vouched for it. I think that, the image that I think it presents for the company, I don't think is one that's necessarily positive. But again, that's all kind of besides the point. And well, it's part of the point, but that's not the central point here. The central point here is whether or not she can prove this person, what's her name?
Brittany Abrahams.
Brittany Abrahams. Can she prove that she was dismissed for complaining about these things, and that she was wrongfully dismissed for, not just taking a chair, but for constantly complaining about these issues? Can she prove that? Does she have a paper trail? What's the argument?
I read the entire lawsuit today. It's about 39 pages. And, there are direct quotes in there. And I would imagine like she does have receipts for several of these. Now, some of these are in-person interactions that I think that's going to be harder to prove. And you are trying to prove motive here. If this is as clear cut as it is, she was let go after taking a chair, that certainly strengthens her argument that that's a pretty flimsy reasoning. Now, WWE is probably going to have their response to this, and I'm sure that these writers are going to have some kind of response to this as well. This is her experience in this company, and whether that culture exists or not. I mean, it's certainly that this paints a pretty brutal picture of some of these ideas. But I'm going back only several years ago to a card in Saudi Arabia where we had the Davari brothers coming in to represent Iran. Like, this is like, that's a horrendous idea that if you had just read about that, you would be horrified. Well, we saw that. So, I mean, the idea that these ideas get raised in private, should we be so stunned about it when we know the history of this? And just going back a few years, like, we don't have to go back 20 years. We can go back a few.
I don't think we have to go back far at all. I can probably, if we dug deep enough, like just even look back at the past 2 years and find plenty of things. I feel like it's really hard to argue that professional wrestling, especially WWE programming, is completely clean of like things that are going to be perceived as like racially offensive or culturally offensive.
Or at the level that are going to be that the audience is expecting that either. Like I read in the lawsuit about, the idea of Aaliyah, the character, maintaining her agency with these males. And it's like, I don't know if this is the company that is necessarily putting that at the forefront. They have made many inroads when it comes to their presentation of female performers, but I don't know if this is the product that is internally like promoting this.
Yeah. And I think those things are important to discuss again, because we are consumers of it, and especially in the mainstream light when this company is being discussed by business outlets as much as it is today. It should probably take a deep look at itself and be a lot more careful about these sort of things, these sort of storylines. But getting back to the lawsuit, it's not the WWE, as distasteful as a lot of these gimmicks have been, as distasteful as maybe what the Davari brothers had to go through in Saudi Arabia. Those things aren't illegal. Those things aren't going to necessarily, make them have to pay Brittany Abrahams for, whatever she's suing for. Can she prove that she was wrongfully dismissed? That's the key focus here.
Yeah, and you're right. And you keep bringing it back to that. And that is what she is being set out to do. And listen, I can certainly read some of these and you can shake your head at them. I also look at like, this is a creative environment, and you also need to have the certain space to have wild ideas that are going to be thrown out there. Now, I think there is a distinct line when you are going into utter racism, homophobia, transphobia. I think you certainly need to be able to draw those parameters. But again, this is a company that we have seen examples of lots of that make it onto screen. So what is the message that these writers are being informed of like what is being encouraged, that my ideas are going to make it onto the screen? And that's going to be, I think, a very difficult argument to prove here. Like, yes, is this in bad taste? That's not what the case is going to be about, of whether this is in good or bad taste. It is going to be, if she was singled out as a Black woman, that
for speaking up against her dissatisfaction with a lot of this potentially offensive creative. Yeah.
And there are witnesses listed here. I would think this is going to be a test of the Endeavor-owned WWE. I mean, the sale or the merger is not completed yet, but historically, and there have been some significant exceptions, WWE fights a lot of these suits. Now, is this one that they want to see a Rolodex of all these angles that have been on television and seeing that loop of Vince McMahon using the N-word? And do they want that constantly as this is the kind of story that, I mean, you can get traction from because of just the nature of it and how much footage is at your disposal to paint this company? And do they want that kind of light, or do they want this to just go away and find a quiet settlement to make this disappear? And internally, maybe they, have maybe a re-examination of the protocols of their writers. And I mean, maybe so, maybe not, but I don't think this is something they want to linger and have all of this attention on poor taste angles, because there are a lot of them they can go through and they're easily accessible.
Yeah. I maybe what's interesting for that discussion is well, how involved will Endeavor be? How involved would an Ariel manual be with a case like this? Or is Vince still in charge here? Because I think we all know how Vince would react to something like this. I feel like Vince would fight it, just for his own ego. But that's just speculation, of course. Are things different now though because he has somebody overlooking him?
I mean, again, this merger is not complete, but even once it is, it's sort of Nick Khan is the president and Vince McMahon is on top of him. So ultimately, this would still be a Vince McMahon call of how combative you would want to be versus the perception of your company at a time when things are delicate. And I don't know if you want to just have this type of attention on your company, but I'm curious to see how much attention a suit like this gets.
After what Vince just managed to escape, I get the sense the man probably feels more bulletproof than he ever has. But hey, things are a little bit different now. So yeah, let's see what becomes of this.
Yes, she is seeking a trial and looking for damages as well. We will see if it can make it that far. Do you feel that this is one that could go far, or is this one that
how much money does Brittany Abrahams have to fight a WWE? That I think that's one of the big questions as well. I'm sensing this might not go that far is my sense at the moment.
Well, we will continue to follow this. She is being represented by the Cochran firm, which actually is connected to the late Johnny Cochran. So interesting to know, like what, sometimes if you are, if a legal firm is taking them on and, it's contingency at the end of things, maybe she has the desire to go further or maybe not. This is obviously you go against the WWE can be very, very costly.
Another interesting aspect of it is, I mean, I was a little surprised to see some of the writers attached to it all. Like, what does this open up, for future, I guess, employees of the company? Are they making themselves liable to future lawsuits? What does it mean for other writers or employees of the company that have been fired in the past? If this becomes a successful lawsuit.
I mean, think of the writers that have been through that company, like hundreds of writers over the last 20, 25 years. And imagine the ideas that have been thrown out there, the culture of the place. I mean, it can certainly, I focus a lot on this because it could certainly open up Pandora's box for many of these people to come forward and share their own stories that I'm sure there are plenty of them. And I think that's a large reason why WWE does not want these writers leaving the company and then being able to speak about their experiences there. But I would certainly say for writers in the company of, when you're on a Slack channel, when you're communicating by email, and this goes for anybody, I would say, always treat your one-on-one communication with the idea that others could see this. And would you want this broadcast or would you want this as part of the discovery of a lawsuit? And you should always have that in mind when you're sending emails and what you think is
or
just
tweeting.
Between you.
Or posting on a YouTube comment section, huh?
It comes back. It comes back for all of you. Well, I'm sure they can discuss all of this beginning at the beginning of May because Nick Khan sent out an email to staff and is telling everyone that they are now to return to the office 5 days a week. This has been something that throughout COVID, there's been a lot of remote working going on in the company. So after 3 years, 1 month, and 14 days, as Nick Khan put in the email, it's time to come back to work. We've got this giant headquarters and we've got to fill seats in it. Look at this thing.
Oh, it looks beautiful. I mean, I'd love for whenever they make a video tour of this place. It looks, or whenever they do a Money in the Bank match in this place, huh? How about that?
Boy, they picked the wrong year to book England when you've got this. I mean, could you get a bit of a write-off if you could do Money in the Bank in this? I don't know how that necessarily would work, but yeah, so you can go back and you can work in person with Vince McMahon. I mean, what could be a better email to receive? How would you feel, Wai, now that you've been working at home for as long as you have? What would it be like for you to transition back to work inside of an office?
It'd be really, really difficult. Really difficult, John.
I
From
ask you that because that's probably going through many of these employees like that. And this goes from like all these companies that are wanting people back in the office space, that people have created new habits. And sometimes I guess you're looking at productivity as well. And that's an aspect to it. But it's going to be a big adjustment if you're someone that's been working at home for 3.5 years.
Well, today, again, as I mentioned, I got to spend the afternoon with my son in between working, and that's just a joy and a privilege I wouldn't have had. A lot of people are understandably maybe debating quitting certain jobs that are asking them to come back. It's an adjustment. They're within their rights, to ask for it. A lot of companies are. I'm sure they don't want to have a giant building empty all the time, but for whatever reason, they're asking people to come back. I feel for them if they really don't want it. Certain aspects I do miss, though. I miss having colleagues that I could just kind of bullshit with and not do work and just talk to from time to time. The social aspect of it, I do miss.
So the productivity would be, you would drag that down. That would be your reason to go back. Me and Brandon Thurston talked about this today. Another aspect is that if a percentage of people are not willing to come back, I mean, that does feed into these inevitable cuts, and that produces, it's like, okay, that's a lot painless when there's people that are voluntarily not willing to come back to the office. I mean, it sounds pretty cutthroat, but there's going to be a lot of that this year, I would assume. PWInsider.com reporting that Impact, who are teasing a big name at their Chicago tapings this weekend, it looks to be the former Naomi, Trinity Fatu, that will be coming into Impact. And this is not scheduled to be a one-off, but rather starting with the company. Their shows are Friday and Saturday at Cicero Stadium. And I would state that just as I think the Knockouts division is one of the more developed women's divisions of any company at this point. It's not the largest platform, but I think creatively, this is something that will be of great value to Impact. That was probably an underdog when you were looking at places that you would have expected Naomi to land.
Agreed. Yeah, she immediately comes in to Impact as maybe the biggest name within the women's division. Maybe, I mean, can you make an argument that she'd be the biggest name in the company at this point? Maybe you can argue it. I'm not really sure, but yeah, it's really big for them. I didn't necessarily know if they would be a player. Honestly, I would have expected her back in the WWE. Now, what does this tell you? Does it tell you that AEW was not interested? Did she maybe, send feelers to New Japan and Stardom? Can we believe reports that say that maybe they weren't interested in her? And what else? What else?
There's also like financial limitations when you're talking about a Stardom, for instance, of bringing somebody over for a big show here or there as well. And Impact is sort of in that spot that I don't know if it's going to be most people's first choice if they have the options that exist. But you do get examples like a Frankie Kazarian who just didn't felt he was being utilized enough at AEW, and has moved on to Impact. So, I mean, it's to me, it's a really good pickup for Impact. I don't know if any one addition to Impact is going to be a game changer for them, but you also have to, I think, be somewhat realistic in what a game-changing move means. I would say it's probably a good sign that the name has come out days in advance when you're teasing a major name in Chicago. And
how many people would have expected it?
Well, it's like, I don't know why you would necessarily be teasing that. And I mean, what are you leading your fans in a direction of?
Who else is from Chicago?
Maybe the guy wants to make amends with people in Impact too. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, very possible. Yeah. I think it's a big test for her in that, she's been good in WWE, but I don't know if she's ever escalated to that level of, like one of the Four Horsewomen or like an Asuka or a Bianca Belair, where we can look at her body of work and say, wow, this was like an incredible Naomi match or an incredible Trinity Fatu match. I think she has that chance at Impact Wrestling with the roster that they have. So let's see if she can gain some buzz. I think it's that much harder to gain buzz, unfortunately, when you're a part of the Impact roster, because you're, like in a special cases are people, maybe breaking through. So let's see if she could do that.
How big is that ramp going to be at an Impact taping for her to slide down on her knees, do that entrance?
I don't know. You tell me. You were at Rebel recently.
I don't know how much room there was there.
Okay.
Yeah,
can she get her entrance? Like how much will they, or will she do something completely new?
I would imagine they could take certain aspects of it, but yeah, it's definitely like she's certainly not coming in as Naomi. I would imagine she's just going to go as Trinity, which I mean, it's a pretty seamless transition for her to make. Another transition is Dark Side of the Ring. From Tales from the Territories to the Dark Side, we are going back May 30th on Vice TV. They have confirmed all of the subjects for season number 4. So we have got Chris Candido and Tammy Sitch, Magnum TA, Adrian Adonis, which there is a new book out on Adrian Adonis. I just read it. It's really, really well done. And I'm imagining that's kind of going to be, that book would be the basis for this episode. Doink the Clown, Junkyard Dog, Marty Jannetty, Bam Bam Bigelow, Abdullah the Butcher, Bash at the Beach 2000, and the Grahams, presumably Eddie Graham, Mike Graham, very tragic story involving that family. A lot of these are tragic stories that, I mean, in some with a Magnum TA, it was a tragic end to his career, but somebody that has, continued on and seems to be somebody that has, this is a guy that was paralyzed at the age of 27, and you see him at shows and is always in great spirits. It's not like it's a tragic end, but nonetheless a life-altering event that he went through. But many of these, Candido, Adonis, JYD, Bigelow, I mean, a lot of guys that have just died young. Abdullah the Butcher, I mean, a guy we just saw that recent story that he's essentially broke right now. And I mean, a lot of like Marty Jannetty is just going to be, I don't know, like that's just going to be one disaster after another, I would assume.
And he's the participant in the show itself. He will be interviewed. So, not a lot of things are really kind of covering somebody like a Marty Jannetty recently. So I'm curious to see I am, but I'm also like almost like dreading, to see what the current status update is for somebody like a Marty Jannetty. I'm personally really interested in the Candido and Tammy Sitch one as well. Just because I grew up, watching those people. So yeah. There's how much interest would you say you have for this season?
For several of them, I'm interested to see like an Adrian Adonis. Until I read this book, like they had not done like you didn't have like a real thorough examination of Adonis's career, and he died when he was 34. It was a very sad set of circumstances. Like this is a guy that did have his substance abuse issues, but after leaving the WWF, he was touring in Canada, and this was on the 4th of July, and they ended up swerving allegedly and went off the road, and it killed 3 people, including Adrian Adonis. So, I mean, he had 2 children and not a guy that has been celebrated by WWE. He's not like outside of the Piper match that you see in highlights, not a guy that they have given that Hall of Fame treatment to, or a historical figure that they celebrate. So you don't really get those kinds of stories. I'm sure the Magnum TA one is actually going to be a pretty inspirational one that I think at least has, here is a guy that it's not like this was the downfall of his life, although you could have viewed that as a tragedy. Instead, it's, whenever I've heard this guy, it's a rather uplifting spirit that he sounds of. The Grahams one is, I think, going to be a really heavy one, because you have 3 generations of that family that took their own lives, and it's like utterly tragic. Like Mike Graham, people forget his son took his life 2 years before Mike did, and so Mike had lost his father and his son, and then he kills himself. Like it's a horrible set of circumstances with that family. And as we're talking about all these heavy subjects, and then you have Bash at the Beach 2000 in there, which you understand for certain people, that will be the one that they are going to focus on because it's so recent that they lived through it. And it probably means you get your Russos and such onto that. Also worth noting in the trailer, Jim Ross and Bret Hart, who had pretty much been like not happy with their recent work with Dark Side of the Ring, are back and interviewed for this season. And Bret had been very close with Adrian Adonis, so I imagine he is all over that episode as well. And there's probably a handful ones here that you could weave Brett into. But yeah, he is among the talking heads on this.
All right, May 30th.
May 30th. So it'll be Tuesday nights right after NXT. That's going to be airing on Vice. Will Ospreay did an interview with DAZN and mentioned that his contract with New Japan is up next February. So, I mean, just a timetable to watch out for Will Ospreay. And as you're seeing him and the physical toll that, his style is taking on him, that contract is going to represent, like, what do I want my next 5 years to look like? And is it taking something with a more reduced schedule? Is that a time when he starts to cut out more wherever you sign with, like doing less of like these 1PW shows, and how committed he is to like a Rev Pro, which he, pretty much works with religiously on a yearly basis. Obviously the natural suitors are going to be, interested in a Will Ospreay. And that's a very interesting time for his deal to be up when WWE theoretically, well, they will have their TV deals in place by then. And AEW is probably going to be very aggressive, you would think, as well. So that's an interesting period to be watching out for.
At least at this point, I don't know who else's contracts are up around that time, but to me,
we know the Young Bucks are up like around, give or take, around this area. Kenny Omega, like there's some significant ones that are up.
Yeah, if they don't resign, I suppose. But at this moment, I really feel like Ospreay. My sense is that he's going to be landing a permanent spot in either an AEW or WWE. If we're to believe his maybe sort of like health issues as of late, now is the time for him to make as much money as he can. And to do that, he's probably going to take a role in one of those other companies. We'll see. He becomes, to me, even among the other names, I think he becomes the hottest free agent that's available. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see.
Few ratings notes. Rampage on Saturday night, they did 371,000 viewers, 0.12 in the demo. So this was outside of their normal night, 26th on cable, going against the NBA and the NHL. So with these moves, you had the opposite effect a week prior, where they had that great lead in by the NBA and you did one of their biggest numbers ever. And then this one, you did like the opposite. So I think these are episodes you really can't take too much and apply regarding Rampage. And I think these next 2 weeks are going to be similar. They're airing at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. So I don't know about you, Wai, but I feel like I will speak on behalf of you. It does feel like Rampage is sort of just out in the ether at this point, and it's existing, but it to me feels like every year when it gets bounced around, it becomes tough on the show to rebound from. Yeah. But given the expectancy of this Saturday show, like Rampage just does feel right now as be a show as you could promote.
Maybe soon to be seen, even. Well, heading towards that direction. Yeah. It's still relevant story. Like a lot of the things that we'll be talking about on Dynamite was built off of a Rampage story. So, but how important are those storylines? How much do you necessarily need to watch a Rampage in order to get caught up for a Dynamite? I don't really think you have to at all.
And how much do you throw on these shows during these weeks when it's a chore for your fan just to find the show? It's like trying to satisfy an audience while at the same time realizing that these are going to be lower watched shows. NXT, though, on the other hand, they did a great number on Tuesday night. They did 637,000 viewers, a 0.18 in the demo, 14th on cable. This was going against 2 NBA games and 2 NHL games. It was their highest 18 to 49 audience since October of last year. And this was all male viewership because men in the key demo, their highest since October of 2021. Whereas women in the demo were actually down 16.5% this week. It was also their largest 18 to 34 audience of the year and was including a 15-minute overrun segment that NXT, usually they do about a 5-6 minute overrun, but it went exceptionally long this week with the Indy Hartwell, Tiffany Stratton, and Roxanne Perez match. But this was a great number for NXT. On a normal week, it was a great number, but going against all of those playoff games, and a younger male audience that seemed to inflate this number significantly. So I took that as women had other plans, but the men, I mean, maybe that was the Grayson Waller effect.
Maybe it was, yeah. Or maybe it was, the trunk match that drew all those
So
people.
they killed Pretty Deadly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, how else do you get rid of
Your
people?
baby faces, just that they just killed them on
Well,
national television.
I'm assuming that Pretty Deadly know how to swim, and maybe they swam their way up.
Are they going to show up with like snorkels to the location of Raw next Monday?
I'm thinking they swam pretty far. Yeah. So anyway, I think NXT has found like a really good formula with these sort of like branded shows in a way that AEW has, found similar success as well. You just promote big title matches ahead of like what feels like might be like a mini takeover level show, and listen, it'll pay off. I think the big story coming out of this show was what happened to Indy Hartwell.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're watching this, and if I was to describe this to you, you would have just bought this as, okay, this is like Terry Funk coming back in the Real World Tag League, like injury midway through the match, the underdog is going to be out, and then she guts her way back to the ring. So this moonsault she took, her ankle like got wrapped on the floor, and it looked so nasty, and she is taken to the back.
It was not as bad as the Dante Martin one, but that was the immediate thing that everybody was thinking about.
It was similar in that sense. Yeah. It brought me back to the Dante Martin injury, and you've got her taken to the back, and then she hobbles her way back to the ring and finishes the match. And she is not doing traditional pro wrestling selling. It's not like Tiffany Stratton's working the ankle,
and there was not much of a match afterwards.
No, it was, they were certainly just, we got to get to the finish. And obviously Indy was booked to win this match. And it was just sort of a gutsy effort to get to the end of the match, which again, you're looking at, just
they will
the
celebrate. Look, Cody just had a WrestleMania run because of his, gutsy performance. And
that's it. You hope she didn't do any more damage than what was initially done here, because she was on one leg for the second half of this match. And it's not as though she just got to the ring and they just went right to the finish. Like, they did go for several minutes.
She was like delivering like big boots, like with the injured foot even. So, I mean, number one, I can completely understand. You're somebody who's just been given the championship. It's your first title defense. And you're like, if you don't go back to do the finish, then you lose the championship, and she was going to do anything, I'm sure, if she was going to be cleared to finish the match. I guess I just watch it and I'm like, does it set great precedents? Does it teach a great lesson for people to do this? It's the professional wrestling thing. It's been done. And, she's really kind of made a career moment out of it. So I don't know if it's something we can ever change about professional wrestling. This is
I would certainly have a much stronger stance if we're talking like the fact is she would not have been coming back if it was a neck or a concussion or something of that level. You're hoping that this ankle injury, hopefully it's not any worse. And that the fact she could even do this part, you're hoping it's not significant, but we have not heard the exact diagnosis of this. But yeah, I mean, it's something that they should play up, and they certainly were doing it on social media. Like, you had Dijak staying, like he was right next to her in the medical area as she was getting worked on and came back. But you watch this knowing like the real circumstances, and it was quite the effort here by Indy Hartwell.
And a hell of a test for Tiffany Stratton and Roxanne Perez going out there and basically having to improvise a whole lot of it on live TV without, one of the main, the finish really in ring with them. So I mean, if we're talking about NXT and looking at it as developmental, as a way to get somebody like a Tiffany Stratton a lot of real world experience, she got a handful of it, maybe more than they anticipated.
And I don't know this for a fact, but maybe that did play into why they had such a long overrun of 15 minutes as well. It wouldn't have surprised me. Carmelo Hayes and Grayson Waller, I thought they had a really strong match, including that spot into the stunner when Waller caught him. The ending was a little weird because it looked as though Waller was like kind of just off for the pinfall, and you almost thought he was like getting his shoulder up for the 3 count, but it was not played up like that. So I'm hoping there wasn't any issue there, but it was just a little wonky for the finish. And hopefully there was no issue there. And then you had as well, yet another phantom attack, this time to Sol Ruka that they showed in the back. I did have 2 people inform me that it is a legitimate injury that Sol Ruka has. And typically when they do these phantom parking lot or backstage attacks, it usually means they're going to be gone for a lengthier time. But I don't know what the exact injury is or how long she's going to be out. But I was told by multiple people it is an actual injury that Sol Ruca has, which makes sense given how they did it, which is obviously too bad. But she is gaining a lot of momentum, and you can see the improvements she's made from her first match on television to where she is now. And she has so much more room to grow as well. I could certainly see her being someone when she comes back from this in 18 months or so, being like a real big standout on this brand. Like, she has a ton of athleticism, and when it all clicks, she could be something very special.
Are you just saying 18 months, like as in like what, just a random number, or do you have the sense that it's that serious of it?
No. I mean, just when she comes back, like 18 months from that point of just consistently working. That
Gotcha.
has nothing to do with the injury.
I see. I think she's accomplished enough buzz just in the short amount of time she's had on the roster thus far, where her return will be anticipated, and it might possibly make her that much of a bigger star. So hopefully in this time off, she can obviously rehab, but also work on the promo, work on the character, work on everything else. And
Raw, by the way, it was pretty much the same from last week. 1,815,000 viewers, the exact same as last week. 0.56 in the demo, which was down 3% against the NBA and NHL as well. They were down in 18-34, and still, looking at 1 year ago, they were up 12.5% in viewers, up 28% in 18-49, and up 49% in 18-34. And that was just going against the NBA playoffs. So they're in less homes this year on USA, and they had the NHL going against them on top of that. So these are holding up really, really well in comparison to a year ago when they were going against the playoffs. Today on our official interview show, Tonnage, with John Pollock and Brandon Thurston, we were joined by Pat Crakes. And Pat Crakes, very, very accomplished individual in the world of sports media. He was an executive that rose up the ranks at Fox Sports, and at one time was programming executive and in the rooms for a lot of these negotiations, and was a great interview to speak about the whole television media industry. So we're just going to play a short clip of that interview that Brandon and I did. And this was him talking about the UFC coming to Fox in 2012 when he was there, how the brand was perceived, and seeing that growth. Because remember, it was during the Fox era that Ronda comes up, that Conor McGregor comes up, and where the UFC was by the time that Fox deal matured.
The UFC was a great investment when Fox partnered with them. Eric Shanks had developed that relationship when he was at DirecTV. He brought it over with him, and it was a very successful partnership. It was one of the key cornerstones of being able to turn Speed into Fox Sports 1, which was a multi-billion-dollar valuation exercise for 21st Century Fox, 21 CF at that time, now Fox. And so, we believed and saw the value. But we were strictly licensing the content. And I think one of the things that ESPN was able to do that Fox wasn't able to do was that they were able to offer, though Fox did try to look at this and tried to figure out a way to do this, they with ESPN Plus, they were able to put together a successful way to air pay-per-views, pay a large enough license fee to Endeavor and the UFC that meant that the UFC could take the risk of operating individual live events off the table for themselves, which they were still doing when they were at Fox. And they could focus in on simply running the business, right? ESPN pays them a license fee and accepts kind of the risk on the pay-per-views. And then the UFC participates on the upside over a certain threshold. And that is a great model. And if you listen to anything Ari says, he always talks about stable cash flows, and that's a stable cash flow. So, the UFC was that was always possible for somebody to monetize with UFC. ESPN figured out how to do it. It really basically gave ESPN Plus a reason to exist in the early years of that deal.
So that whole interview with Patrick Crakes is up on the Post YouTube channel, as well as the WrestleNomics channel. So you can grab it from either of those feeds. And we spent about 45 minutes talking with him about all of the upcoming television rights negotiations and a heavy emphasis on the WWE, UFC, and AEW. So stable cash flow way. That's what you want to mature into.
I think that's what we all want, right? Stable cash flow. Yeah. But that's a really interesting clip, John. You know, like could you see a WWE being like could that be a goal of theirs? That a deal similar to what the UFC has with ESPN?
Yes. I think
Mhm.
more and more, I think that you look at the Endeavor playbook and stable cash flow. Like that UFC deal with ESPN Plus, it took away all of the erratic nature of fights falling out on pay-per-views, and we've got to get this guy, we got to save this card with a big main event. It's like when you're guaranteed what you're going to get every month, it gives you a lot of extra sleep at night to know that your pay-per-view revenue is going to be guaranteed every month, and it's something that has
So
worked out.
WWE already has that, but maybe just not to the degree.
They have it to that sense, but when you look at how much more valuable would they be to an ESPN Plus or any of these when it comes to the guaranteed money, but the streamer can also monetize these shows with a pay-per-view component. It's like WWE's not taking on any of that risk. The streamer is, and our rights are that much more important, and we can get an increase on them. So that is what I could certainly see WWE looking towards and seeing the success of the UFC model and wanting to replicate it. Like think about where like some of these shows this year, from the Rumble, that big card in Montreal, WrestleMania goes without saying, and this show in Puerto Rico alone, like they have done a great job this year of making each event feel like a big event. There has not been just a nothing happening pay-per-view that's just our obligation to put a show on because it's the month of February. Like everyone this year has felt big.
And at least in the case of Puerto Rico, in the case of that Clash of the Castle show, they've done a great job of getting paid to put on those shows too.
You add the site fees in there, like that's, they are finding whatever revenue that they can monitor. One final thing, and then we will get there. We wanted to make mention of one of our dear close friends, Dan the Mouth Lovranski, who is retiring this year after nearly 25 years in the wrestling radio space.
Retiring from wrestling radio.
Yes.
Still going to do his music show, but yes.
CIUT.FM will still be the home of Dan Lovranski on Tuesday afternoons. But Dan Lovranski is wrapping things up with the Sunday night's main event crew. He will be doing his final show this week. And Dan Lovranski is one of my closest friends and someone that I've known for of those 24 years that he has been doing this. I have known him for, I believe, 23 of them, as I recall.
Wow. I mean,
Yes.
I'm probably not that far off from you, but even beyond that, I mean, I started my whole journey into even this side of professional wrestling by listening to Dan and Jeff, and Donnie Abreu, like in the very early days of the Law. So this is like a bit of a, big journey just for me too, because he's somebody I've looked up to for a long time, somebody I'm very privileged to consider a friend at this point myself. So yeah. Hey man, enjoy the retired life. Sitting out there, listening to the records in a Hawaiian shirt.
Well, I will tell you, Wai, that I was in contact with one Dan Lovranski, and I invited him to your backyard.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Well, perfect.
I volunteered your backyard, and he is in. So
you are more than welcome to at any point. Maybe we'll even try some smoothie recipes.
Ooh, I can't wait. My smoothie game has been, I am now going to send away I might start TikTok just for smoothies, to be quite honest. There will be no wrestling content on there. I'm just going to do a smoothie TikTok channel.
I would create a personal TikTok just to sign up for your smoothie.
I'm pretty good at them, to be honest. Like I look at them now and it's like, I found my groove.
You send it's not just like simple frozen fruits and in a, like a coconut milk base here. Like, can I share a photo, John?
Go for it.
Like, you're doing like vanilla extract or like I don't know what you call this stuff, but like you're putting on like what is this, the brown stuff you put on, what is it,
granola,
yeah.
Yes.
Like it's I'm not getting this to work anyway.
Not so smooth, was it?
Hey, if you want to hear us talk about smoothies, which
tomorrow, Thursday, Post Wrestling Cafe, we are going to spend a lot of time. Look at this photo. How did you find this one? Was this when we did this the other day?
I just made it.
Oh my God. I was telling Wai about my my exercise routine and he just laughed at me. So this is going to be coming out on Thursday for all cafe members. talk, something we do way too much of because we're almost an hour in, and I believe we have a Dynamite to talk about. So anyway, everyone check out Dan Lovranski this week, and we will be look at it.
Beautiful smoothie.
Dude, that's
this.
like
Ooh,
that's a professional looking smoothie.
What's in this again? What's in this again?
That is I believe that is chocolate granola. It's either chocolate or blueberry. I think that's the chocolate. Yeah. Then this is a banana smoothie with I can't remember.
Banana, pineapple, yogurt,
banana, pineapple. Yes.
Beautiful. Wow.
A great combination. Everything goes with banana. That's my rule.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
And everything goes well in Sunrise, Florida. I don't know. They were at the FLA Live Arena on Wednesday night, kicking things off. Orange Cassidy and Bandido for the AEW International Championship. So I was expecting we might get let's be realistic, a match of the month. That's what I was expecting out of this match. It was a very good match, but this was more of a story match in that Orange Cassidy has been beaten down so much and he is wearing the effects of that. And we got a lot of lucha stuff between them, and they're going over the backgrounds of each. And Cassidy is relying a lot on kind of his weak offense. At one point, as Bandido puts up his guns, Orange Cassidy places his hands into his own pockets, and we get into some dives from Bandido, go through the break, and Orange Cassidy is delivering these lazy chops, and they explain that's protecting his hand. Bandido does his strength spots with the delayed vertical, the one-arm military press, and then he escapes the mousetrap, which they know nobody has been able to do that yet. And a pop-up by Orange Cassidy comes down with the orange punch, follows with the beach break, and gets him in 15 minutes and 17 seconds. Taz explains he doesn't think Orange Cassidy is 100%, but this is his 20th defense of the international title, second only to Jade Cargill when it comes to title defenses in AEW. I thought this was a good match, but to me, it did not reach what I was expecting, which was definitely high, but I was left wanting in this one.
I guess I could see expectations being pretty damn high. Like if we're talking about match of the year at this point, John,
I said match of the month. Match of the month.
Oh, match of the month. Gotcha. Well, even that, it's been a pretty strong month. We're talking here, for April. I thought it was a very good match, and I think incredibly worthy of this Orange Cassidy international title run. It's a bit of a mouthful. He continues, I think, what's been he's the best champion that AEW has, and I think commentary is kind of pushing him as that as well. Yes, Jade Cargill has been a longer reigning champion, but they're basically pushing Orange Cassidy as the guy who's defended the most, and the guy who's putting on the most consistently great TV matches. And it helps that he has incredible partners like a Bandido here, who always manages to, I think, create a memory in audiences' minds with some incredible power moves. So I thought this was a great reintroduction to Bandido for the AEW audience here, and it seems like they'll be continuing this association with Orange Cassidy.
You know what he needs to call his delayed vertical now?
What?
His Visa.
Very good. Few guys could use that. Maybe Pac could. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with Pac.
Renee is with Adam Cole, and the audio cuts out, so we don't even get Renee's question. But Cole's pissed. He wants to call out Chris Jericho tonight, and if he doesn't come out, he's going to find him. So then Orange Cassidy walks in with Bandido and says, "You want to interview me?" And Renee says, "Well, I was actually interviewing Adam Cole," and she explains everything that went down last week with Cole and Baker and Jericho, and he just responds, "Oh," and walks off. And then Bandido does the exact same, and they leave. And you think it's just some cute line, but there was actually a reason for this that would be revealed later on.
This is about as much of a, hey, let's be friends, interaction with Orange Cassidy as you need. For Orange Cassidy, it was really kind of the perfect promo, and I'm really
a reason to help Adam Cole, who he had this pretty lengthy program with that was brought up in the main event. That sometimes we forget about these programs because they come and go, but I like when they draw back to that. And here was a reason for Orange Cassidy to have a reason to befriend Adam Cole and come to his aid later.
I'm personally happy that hey, we've had a lot of guys, especially the luchadors, who come in, look amazing, and then they might get even a standing ovation, but then they're just forgotten about for the next few weeks. It looks like we're actually getting something with Bandido, at least as odd of a pairing as he is with Orange Cassidy. Maybe that's what will make it work. So I hope I hope this sticks.
Then Renee interviews Jungle Boy and Darby Allin, and Darby explains maybe they went a little too far last week verbally, and if he knew what was going to happen to Jungle Boy, he wouldn't have been up in the rafters last week because it was crap what happened to you, and he suspects that they're going to pull the same stuff on him tonight and asks Jungle Boy to watch his back. Jungle Boy agrees they went too far. We might never be best friends, but he wishes it could be the two of them tonight, to which Darby says, yeah, and if it was, I would have beaten you again. A reference to their match on April 21st, 2021. You remember that one?
I do not remember that one. I'm sure it was pretty good. He also says, see you out there.
He says, see you out there. And then Jungle Boy never came out to watch his back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he put it, this was like someone else that we've been talking about. Everything seems to be, they're on the same page temporarily. And then it's just one little thing that happens that sets them off. And
so what was the problem here? Was it miscommunication, or was Jungle Boy being deliberately sort of vague?
Jungle Boy was willing to help him, and then you got to get in this dick line at the end. You got to get in the last word. It's like, I'm not helping you. Why?
Oh, okay. You're right.
Like I wouldn't have helped this guy either. He's like, oh, you got to get a dig in about how I beat you.
Yeah, so he was committed to going out there, and then Darby said that line. I mean, I almost took it almost as just more like friendly, almost kind of like flirting, like I didn't take any offense to it. I thought, who's in the wrong here? Was it Jungle Boy or Darby Allin?
So you're a guy with thick skin, not me.
Okay. I would come out and help you, even if you said something like that.
Well, that's nice. Dax Harwood and Jeff Jarrett. This was the match all week long. Way was just texting me about it. I was like, I can't wait. And I'm going to say, like, they aired in picture-in-picture, like, these highlights of FTR and the Briscoes, and it was, like, really sad to be just watching, like, Jay Briscoe here in action. It had, like, the feel of, like, this was so recent, and it was so recent.
It was.
And you're just watching these highlights and just seeing all of, like, these career highlights that these four had over the course of this year.
Yeah, it's almost maybe part of it, for me at least, is because, like, Mark Briscoe has transitioned and he's seemed to deal with it so well that it almost feels like a lot more time has passed than actually has. But you're right, like, it's like we're only a few months removed.
That last match was December.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we Singh, Lethal, and Dutt, as well as Cash Wheeler, they're barred from ringside. So we're getting a one-on-one match, and this early on they had like one like messed up spot where they missed a shoulder block. Like, they made no contact, but then Dax still went down from it. And it was just an odd, like, miscommunication that they had. But then they got back into the match. And this was just like a very basic match where Jarrett was constantly going for the knee of Dax, and Dax would evade the figure four, and then he would chop the hell out of Jeff Jarrett. This guy took so many chops in this match. Dax can't get the sharpshooter. Then Dax stops the stroke. He hits a pile driver, and then they fight on the floor. More chops to Jarrett, and then Jarrett is going back to the figure four. One of them is countered into an inside cradle, and then as Dax lifts him up for a vertical suplex, Sanjay Dutt appears from underneath the ring, pulling down Dax's leg. It's the Rick Rude Ultimate Warrior finish, but this time Dax kicks out and then chases Dutt around the ring, and as he runs in, he gets hit by the stroke, and Jarrett pins him in 11 minutes and 12 seconds. Dutt hands Jarrett the tag title. He kisses the belt, wears it around his neck, and it would seem that Jarrett and Lethal will be going for these tag belts.
Yeah, seems like it. So that booking, I think, is logical. I guess I kind of wish it was Lethal that was the one that was, picking up the victory instead of Jeff Jarrett here, because ultimately, like, we are still talking about a 55-year-old Jeff Jarrett who's moving incredibly well, by the way. I hope I move that well at 55. But still, like, Dax Harwood, as a singles competitor, was pretty up there. And yes, I know there were shenanigans involved. I still wouldn't have done it. Personally, I also don't think the distraction finish at the end was done in a very creative way either. So, again, like, grading this match on a curve with a 55-year-old, I thought Jarrett looked, pretty decent in there. But, like, should we be grading on a curve? I guess when you're watching Dynamite,
it was fine. Like, it's not one of those like standout Dax singles performances that we got, but it was.
Was it a standout Jeff Jarrett performance?
I'll say it was a very nice professional match, minus that weird shoulder block issue. Tony Khan's announcement is that the opening ceremonies of the Owen Hart Cup will take place at Double or Nothing. So I don't know if that is going to mean people from different countries are going to be marched into the stadium and they're going to have someone carrying the flag for the team in their tracksuits. And then the tournament is going to be held. All the matches will be in Canada. Hence all of these Canadian dates, including Forbidden Door in Toronto. And then the finals will be at the Saddle Dome in Calgary on July 15th, which is a Saturday. And this would be about as close to a confirmation that I don't think these finals will be taking place at a live house show.
You don't think so?
I think there will be a way to watch this on that Saturday in Calgary.
Okay. I think that's a nice little tie-in, maybe that some of us might have kind of put together, but I wasn't necessarily thinking about the Owen Hart tournament yet, but I think it's wonderful, to have that atmosphere for Calgary and to just do the rest. I mean, they were also making mention of Owen's connection to New Japan Pro Wrestling, so
and they had footage of it too in this announcement.
Yeah, and so it adds a bit of extra significance for having the ceremony at Forbidden Door. I'm curious to know what the ceremony is. I think they should parade all the participants out, do the whole hey, here's who we're going to feature.
Would the ultimate guy to land though is Bret Hart on commentary.
This I don't think it's happening. I don't know what's the latest with him and Martha.
It's
complicated.
They certainly have their odds. There's also the deal of Bret's Legends deal with WWE as well. That would likely prevent such a scenario, providing that's still intact and such.
On the scale of Tony Khan announcements, do you think this one was justified?
See, they promoted it as we're going to hear from Tony Khan.
Oh, okay. So this was
not a major announcement from Tony Khan. So in fairness, they did temper the wording here.
Okay.
I mean, you're going to make announcements on your shows. It's just, this is part of wrestling.
I don't know if they always need to be promoted though,
No,
you're getting
a lot of the times they work though. So
yeah,
they go to that well a lot. Wardlow and Arn Anderson. Wardlow destroyed Ariel Levy in 1:34. So one of the wrinkles now to Wardlow is that before he hits the big wind-up lariat, he uses the Glock signal to set it up. And then he killed this guy with power bombs. And this was back to the old audience reactions for Wardlow. They're chanting one more time. And they also add in these cutaways to Arn, who's just looking horrified at what this monster is doing. And he wins in 94 seconds. And Arn gets on the mic, which is already a great segment. Jesus Christ, young man, have an ice bath and go have a 12-pack, he informs Ariel. And he calls the two of them Beauty and the Beast. And he's figured out who's who in the dressing room. And tomorrow is the draft. And he quickly clarifies, the NFL draft. And
who is the Beauty and who is the Beast here?
Well, Arn's clearly the Beauty and Wardlow's the Beast. And explains how you take a pick and that person can turn you into a dynasty. And that's what Wardlow is. No one in AEW can do what he does. He can put AEW on his shoulders and take AEW into the next millennium.
Maybe Arn thinks he's still on Nitro.
That's a long time. The next millennium? Wardlow's just getting started.
I mean, I think he's young. I don't even know how old he is, but can he live for 1,000 years?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll see.
The next millennium. Man, we're going to get Y3J.
At this rate, sure. I'm sure he'll still be having great matches then. So,
but Arn explains that for Wardlow to be with him, sometimes you're going to have to yank a guy's eye out, bite a thumb off, or crack him over the head with a chair. And with that, Christian and Luchasaurus walk out, and Cage walks up the steps, but then backs off. No words are exchanged, but we are looking to go in the direction of Luchasaurus and Wardlow. But more importantly, we are going to get a mic off between Arn and Christian at some point. And that, to me, you could put that on the pay-per-view.
High hopes for that, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm hoping Wardlow changes things up a bit. Maybe gouge some eyeballs or something. It was kind of maybe nice this week to have a bit of a rewind back to his, just squash match days. But this is a run. This is his third time with the championship. And I think he really has to show this time around a new wrinkle to his game that could get people excited about, seeing this guy move ahead.
Week 1, I liked it with Arn. So I like this change up of things. Renee speaks to Guevara and MJF, and the two kiss each other on the forehead. They are best friends, and they bring up all the complaints people have, how they're ruining the sanctity of the sport, with Guevara agreeing to lay down at Double or Nothing, but they don't care, and they each got themselves presents. There is a matching vest for MJF and a Burberry scarf for Sammy Guevara as they hug. And then RJ City gets mauled by the BCC as Moxley promises scars are going to be left on Dynamite tonight. It was as though Moxley heard Cody on Monday about pick a spot, leave a scar, Brock, and Moxley was ready, and he was going to inflict a scar.
And he did.
I hope RJ City didn't get a scar here.
Well, last time they did one of these attacks backstage, it didn't end so well for they did scar somebody pretty hard.
Yeah. Will there be a AEW with John Moxley at some point?
I have to think so. Come on.
That's a long-term one.
Huh.
Darby Allin and Sammy Guevara, the middle of the show, and MJF comes out with his own brand of pickles that he ate.
Yeah, he was like really promoting these pickles at the press conference when he won the championship. So every champion gets the food, of course, you know.
What would you more likely buy, a wrestler's champagne or a wrestler's pickles?
For me, it'd probably be the pickles, actually.
Yeah.
I don't have much use for champagne.
I'd probably just save my money, but this guy has to know that there is an absolute irritation to hearing somebody speak while eating at the same time, because it's just the most repulsive trait somebody can do on a broadcast. Yeah.
It's I mean it's among them. I know you have a special sort of, peeve about it all.
It's gross. I can't handle it. He's got to know this.
What I can't really handle is passing a pickle jar around and having somebody dig with their bare hands into the pickles, which is what Taz had to do here.
Dude, there was, after all of this, Taz is still holding that pickle like he's been working on it for like 20 minutes or something. Like,
hard to call a match while eating a whole pickle, though. You can't really take a break to finish it.
I guess not. So they're having their match, and Guevara ends up hitting a low blow behind Paul Turner's back and then leaps into a top rope Asai moonsault. They go through the break. Darby stops the Three Amigos, and then there's a crazy tope by Darby, caught by a cutter by Guevara on the floor, which looked fantastic. And stupid me, I'm like, that is the craziest thing they're going to do in this match. And then Sammy brings out a table, and Sammy is placed on the table. Ty Mello runs down to distract Darby, and this allows Sammy to run back in, one-man Spanish fly, and he places Darby on the table, and he hits the most picture-perfect 630 off the top through this table on the floor to Darby. Utter insanity.
It's crazy, yeah. I won't remember it, unfortunately, like a week from now. And that's just unfortunate. Like the point where we're at, where like
this should be in the show open.
Shit, like something like this, I years ago I would have been talking about like for the rest of my life. But
imagine Mick Foley did this at Hell in a Cell.
Oh my God, are you kidding me? Yeah, but now it's just like it's so commonplace.
And then Darby beats the count, and this prompts MJF to come down, and he throws the skateboard to Darby. And behind the referee's back, Guevara takes the Eddie Guerrero bump, and Paul Turner turns around, spots him with the skateboard, and then Paul Turner calls for a DQ. Paul Turner calls for a DQ. God, this is what's next. Rick Knox successfully counts someone out.
Maybe Red
12
Shoes
minutes,
next.
47 seconds, and I think everyone knows now where this is going with these finishes. And MJF attacks Darby, goes to use the ring when Jungle Boy finally makes his way down and clears the ring with a chair. And MJF cuts a promo on Jungle Boy and tells Darby that he can now use his tears to pleasure himself while listening to My Chemical Romance, because you two are going back to the undercard because you suck. And that led to Tony Schiavone getting his big moment on the mic. Listen up, you prick. And Tony Khan says Sammy Guevara has earned the title shot at Double or Nothing, but he might not be the only one. So we are going to have a tag match next week. And if MJF and Sammy Guevara win, they will face each other at Double or Nothing. But if Jungle Boy and Darby Allin win, it will be a 4 pillars match at Double or Nothing.
Yes. So I think we're getting the 4 pillars match, John.
You think?
Well, who knows? I don't know. Could be.
Maybe they have another finish in store for us.
Maybe somebody will screw somebody again, and then will lead to somehow 9 people in the match. I don't know.
I haven't been like, I like the way they were starting this, like the first phase of the different promos, and then we're building up wins. I haven't been down for the detour. No.
Everything after the opening segment, and to some people, maybe even the opening segment last week, I think has been just it's weird. Like it feels like adaptation, the movie, like the Nicolas Cage movie.
Yes.
So like the first portion until like the final act is like one movie, and then the third act is completely different. Kind of feels like that in tone. Like it's been a real shift in tone, in my opinion, where they were basing a lot of these rivalries based off of realism. Guys like coming out, cutting their promos on MJF, even up until last week, cutting promos on each other. And then all of a sudden we just kind of get into this overly gimmicky, like thing with this tournament that was always meant to be a fake out. This sort of money relationship with MJF and Sammy that I think is way too cartoony for a main event level like story. This is theoretically your main event heading into this pay-per-view. I think it's, for me, derailed this entire thing a little bit. It's a pretty convoluted way, in my opinion, just to stretch out these, programs until you get to the pay-per-view. There's almost no suspense whatsoever for the outcome of the match next week. So I have not been a fan of these couple weeks.
Backstage, MJF and Sammy Guevara are going to leave, and MJF's pissed about Tony Khan playing games ever since he won the belt, and makes a line that wherever I go, the Triple B goes. And he goes to his truck, and it's empty, but he tells Sammy it's full when Sammy goes to join him in the car. So MJF takes off by himself. Adam Cole is out. He says Jericho has crossed a line that he can't come back from. He wants to hurt him, and mentions Britt Baker, and then Jericho's music plays, but he appears on the screen, and he won't go anywhere near Adam Cole, who allowed the love of his life to get beaten right in front of him, and Adam, you did nothing to stop it. Adam Cole, you're a coward, but my guys will take care of you. So he sends out the JAS, and it's a 4-on-1 attack. Orange Cassidy and Bandido come out, and the JAS still have the advantage when all of a sudden Roderick Strong makes his AEW debut, running down and evens things up, and he clears house. Cole and Strong hug to a big pop, and they bring up the history here between Adam Cole and Orange Cassidy as he's watching on, and Tony Khan making the announcement that Roderick Strong is all elite.
Yes, he is. This one was a surprise, I think, almost to everybody.
Guy hasn't wrestled since last summer.
Yeah. Word hadn't really, come out that he had received his release from the WWE. He was not somebody that I think people have been buzzing about as a free agent, because I don't think anybody knew about the status of his free agency. So he was not a name. Like, this was like a very legitimate surprise, I'm sure, for everyone.
Yeah, it was kept very quiet. So
again, what does it tell you? Like what? You think the guy just asked, or do you think maybe contract lapse? Like, I guess we don't know. We'll find out eventually, I'm sure.
Yeah. Do you like this addition for Roderick Strong? I mean, it's it was like for a while like the missing piece of the Undisputed Era, but it's the Disputed Era at this point.
At the moment, but I mean,
Kyle will be back at some point. But
Kyle
Bobby Fish is probably not back.
Probably, yeah. And I think you could still promote an Undisputed Era with just the three of them minus Bobby Fish. I don't know how much of the audience will be complaining, unfortunately, at this point. Listen, like, there are a lot of people in AEW. They're signing guys like every single week. Do you remember Jay White? Made his debut a couple weeks ago. John, who else? Commander. Like, there are a lot of guys on this roster, and that continues to be maybe a question of whether or not they have enough space for everybody. But I think Roderick Strong is a great fit. I think he's one, you absolutely should sign because of the many. Number one, he's an incredible wrestler. I think he's become a decent promo, like in the time that he's spent in the Performance Center as well. But you have so many connections on this roster that you could tell stories with Roderick Strong. Of course, Adam Cole, future trios match with the Undisputed Era when Kyle returns. Marina Shafir, of course, maybe something with Stokely Hathaway. You could pair him in ROH. I think he pairs wonderfully as well with like a future role with the Bucks. You remember like the Bucks talking about that story with Bryan Danielson at PWG in that match where they got roughed up by Danielson and Roderick Strong. That's a future rematch right there. There's just so much you could do with him. And for a guy that's, probably wasn't going to get called to the main roster, or at least we don't know, but they had plenty of chance, of course, and they never took. I think AEW is a perfect fit for him, and I think he's good for AEW.
QTV is back. It's been a rough few weeks for them. And Hobbs comes in and puts QT up against the wall, stating things were going well when I was following the book. And QT calls it a conspiracy against him. And QT led him to the title, and he will again. He promises. He gives him his word, and Hobbs tells him, fix it. So QT says, we are moving on to plan B, whatever that is. Jade Cargill against Taya Valkyrie for the TBS Championship. So Taya will be disqualified if she uses the road to Valhalla, but that doesn't stop her from immediately going for it. But then Jade stops it. So Jade then pulls her by the leg into the splits. They fight on the floor during the break. Jade scales to the top for a superplex, followed by a Canadian destroyer. And Taya then counters the Jaded with an arm drag, double stomps Jade, and applies the overhooks, lifts her up, but then puts her down, knowing that she'll get disqualified. And this gives Jade the opening to roll her up and hook the tights in 8 minutes and 14 seconds. A lot more selling than a usual Jade Cargill match. How did you think she did in a 8-minute setting here?
I thought it was meh, to be honest. Like, I think Jade is somebody that like I have in the past like been grading on a curve, and maybe at some point I kind of should still, but it's been like a few years now, John. And even though she's shown improvement, I think the progress has been like relatively slow because I think the bar continues to be set so high in AEW. And in the meantime, I feel like with this run, she's taking a valuable resource that I think could be better used for a division that is struggling for TV time right now, and they're burning through so many of these challengers, and that's what Taya has just kind of like come and gone. This was her first match on Dynamite, which is a title challenge. Like for a lot of people, I think your title challenge should be like the culmination. Her first match on Dynamite, yes, she's had a few Rampage matches, but like for a lot of people, this is their introduction to Taya on Dynamite, and it's just like, lost in a title match to Jade Cargill. And where does she go after this?
Well, it was very strange because you have this whole match where she is handicapped by not being able to use her finisher. And then she knocks down Mark Sterling and Layla Gray. Okay. And then she lifts up Aubrey Edwards for the road to Valhalla. And man, did this strike a chord with this audience who were not down for Taya going after their beloved referee here. And I can't imagine that they were expecting any kind of reaction but this when you're of all the people to choose. Like if you are grabbing one of the male refs, it's a big pop that you're teasing it. But for Aubrey, not taken that way. So it almost felt as though you were turning Taya here, which I would think at the very least you want to do the match where it's finisher versus finisher. And you took away, to me, the most interesting aspect of this. And I don't even know if they're circling back to this.
I don't think so. I think this is it, after this feud. But it feels kind of early, for a heel turn. We're talking about her, like she's not even established really on the AEW roster yet. So I don't know if necessarily the solution is to like have her win a TBS championship, for instance. But I just feel like I think if we're talking about like who should have the TBS championship, I almost think like Jade and Athena could be switching roles, and I think under maybe the shelter of an ROH, that'd be a perfect platform for her to like continue to develop, even with the belt on her hand. Whereas I think right now for television, you need somebody who can work to the level of an Athena, of one of your more established stars, just to open up the division and create some really big matches. I'm kind of tired of these squash match sort of like kind of basic level matches we've been getting.
I know that Ring of Honor is going to be, it's not the priority, but it's still going to be on their schedule once the Saturday show comes. But to me, once you add this new show, I don't think you can justify an Eddie Kingston or a Athena being strictly earmarked for ROH. Like you can work both of them, but exclusive to ROH, that makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I imagine you'd get guys cycling in and out, like similar to, like what people are doing in NXT, where you get a main roster guy out there, go into ROH, maybe refresh a little bit, and then come back to Big Pop. Maybe you have that, but yeah, I don't know.
Britt Baker, with her black eye, is with Jamie Hayter, who is in a sling, and they noted that the Outcast had sent Jamie Hayter to the hospital last week, and thus she could not come to save Britt Baker. So explaining that, which was noted as a big gap last week. But she's in the sling, and Hayter was sent to the hospital, and thus they have declared war. And the only way that this is going to end is by sending them to the morgue.
The bloody morgue, she said
bloody
specifically.
morgue.
Yeah. So, I mean, I hear the words war. I hear the word blood. Seems like it could be a tease for blood and guts.
Morgue match.
Or a morgue match, or a trunk match.
Could be. Maybe we'll get an interpromotional. Tony D'Angelo and Stax come in.
Yeah.
And then they reunite with Two Dimes.
Maybe. Does Taya join the Outcast?
Sure.
Yeah, I guess why not?
I guess. Then we had an all-timer here from Excalibur. I had to rewind this multiple times.
You also had a Shawn Spears, Ricky Starks, and Bullet Club Gold video.
Yes. Yeah, that was part of the lineup here for Rampage.
Oh, okay.
So we got Starks and Spears against Juice Robinson and Jay White. Juice is coming to kick them in the balls. Man has a mission for Saturday or Friday when this show airs. Dustin Rhodes and Keith Lee, naturally limitless, will be in action. The Outcasts will speak. The Acclaimed and Daddy Ass will speak. Anna Jay against Ashley Diamboise, and Cash Wheeler against Jay Lethal. And then Dynamite has the tag match to set up Double or Nothing, and then an 8-man tag with the JAS against Orange Cassidy, Adam Cole, Bandido, and the debuting Roderick Strong next week. And Excalibur, like, just lightning his way through this. And at the end, we have Shivani. I thought we were going to take a break. Me too. And then they do go to break. But dude, if you listen to this, it was like Excalibur was almost didn't make it to the end, but the man is just something else when it comes to these rundowns.
He's like the micro machines guy now.
This was one of the craziest. And the main event, Kenny Omega, Konosuke Takeshita against the Blade and the Butcher, with Bryan Danielson on commentary, accusing the Elite of resting on past laurels, where Kenny Omega hasn't even gone after MJF for the AEW title, and the Bucks haven't gone after the tag belts. So we've got Kip Sabian at ringside, along with Penelope Ford, and Omega goes for a dive and gets tripped by Kip, and Butcher then dives onto him. They beat on Omega throughout the break, makes the tag to Takeshita, and clotheslines Butcher. Brainbuster is hit, and then there's a 2-on-1 attack with Omega making the save, and then there is a Blue Thunder Bomb to Butcher. Blade is in for the save, and then we get Takeshita and Omega with a flying knee, Snapdragon to Blade, Tope Con Hero to Blade and Kip, and then Takeshita drilling Butcher with the knee to score the pinfall.
I thought the match was good, but I don't think it necessarily stole the show or anything. And I don't know if it was really designed to. Like, I was really excited to see the pairing of Omega and Takeshita, but I don't know if like this was the type of match where they showed any like spectacular, like Golden Lovers level type of, or even Hangman and Kenny level type of like special tag team offense or anything. Just seemed like it was, I guess, for Kenny Omega Takeshita, like a bit more of a standard match just to kind of set up the post-match angle, but it was good. What did you think?
Yeah, I felt that with a number of these matches, and certainly with the Cassidy Bandido. It's like you do realize how high I think the expectation level is for Dynamite. That I would not even say I applied to Rampage or any other AEW programming, but on Dynamite, I think for a main event, like you are expecting your 4+ star match, and sometimes multiples of those on one show, which is a pretty insane level to expect. Like this was a fine match, but it was more so to get to the ending where you had this big angle coming. And I think the fact that this main evented the show, you kind of knew that this was not just going to be the big all out go for it all match. It was designed to be a story at the end, which is what this was. So Danielson is constantly talking on commentary about Takeshita being better suited to train with BCC than the Elite. And he gets on the mic and calls Takeshita a professional, while Omega's an amateur who looks exhausted and your best days are behind you, living off a legacy you built in Japan. Takeshita is a prodigy. And if you trained with the Elite, if you trained with the BCC, as he corrects himself, but then he yells down at the crowd and actually did a pretty good recovery here. And with that, the BCC, they attack Omega. Danielson has his screwdriver, and the Young Bucks arrive, throwing around super kicks. Omega hits a Snapdragon to Moxley, and Matt takes the screwdriver, hands it off to Omega, but Takeshita stands in front and does not want Omega to stab Moxley. So with that, Moxley shoves Takeshita into Omega, and hits a paradigm shift onto Omega. Takeshita's looking all confused. Danielson comes in and raises his arm, says he wants Takeshita to be with the BCC. But then all of a sudden, as he's standing there, Yuta just low blows him. So I guess that was his decision he had to make. And when he didn't embrace them, low blow to Takeshita, and Moxley attacks Takeshita with the screwdriver to end the show.
Yeah, so he's bled with the BCC. What does that mean?
He has, he has now swapped, blood. So this was either his initiation or, I mean, just for the numbers, it would make logical sense for Takeshita to ultimately go with the BCC and opens up your ability to do this 4-on-4 match.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, a heel Takeshita is not something that I would think about, but why not? You know, and
it serves the purpose with Don Callis of finally having Callis turn. And
now how would Callis explain, you know, getting busted up by the BCC?
Well, you know, he filmed a message that was to air if his demise is met, and this was a I think a very hard one to explain if Callis ends up with these guys, and even Takeshita here. I mean,
he bled with the BCC. Okay,
maybe that
was his initiation.
Yeah, it's like you bled your way into the BCC, and when your blood met our sweat, you saw our vision.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, you know, it could all make sense. I think this is the A program, you know, clearly heading into Double or Nothing. And I think it's in really good shape.
The hottest thing they have at the moment. Yeah. And I certainly see this being your anarchy in the arena. And if it's this 4-on-4 match, one thing it's a like Hangman is outselling this screwdriver injury, but it's like his name isn't even brought up. And maybe that's by design that they want you to sort of forget about him, but it's sort of like out of sight, out of mind at the moment.
So let's say Takeshita joins BCC, then Hangman makes it 4. So then BCC have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How does that work? What do you think?
You're talking Moxley, Danielson, Claudio, Yuta, and Takeshita, right? You would have 5 on Omega, Page, the Bucks.
Well, listen, Takeshita could really be on either side. There's still a lot of things they could do with it. So yeah, it's interesting still.
All right. That was Dynamite. It was, I would say it was like an average edition of Dynamite. You know, the wrestling was fine. The stories, like I can see where, like, you can probably put together a good amount of this Double or Nothing card of where you can see things building to. And I think there's a wavering level of where they're at, but with the understanding you have like 4 weeks still till this pay-per-view.
Yeah. I'm really excited about whatever they're doing with the BCC and the Elite. Matt Hahn here is suggesting Kota Ibushi might be able to join the Elite. I mean, that would, you know, really take it to the next level, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think the story is being really well told. Phantom bump aside from Don Callis. Everything else has, I think, been really good. I've not been so hot on the Pillars direction as of this past couple weeks, but they're clearly trying to drag this thing out all the way to the pay-per-view. And by the time the match takes place, I'm sure I'll be pretty hot for it, but I haven't been really that enthused by the creative. And what else have we got? Baker, Hayter versus the Outcast.
I think you're with the Outcasts. That's the, unless you go the mixed tag route, which they've kind of teased with like a reason for Cole and Baker to team up with a Jericho and Saraya, especially if Jamie Hayter is actually hurt.
Right.
Which we don't know at this moment. Like that's certainly an option and might be an interesting like way to do that instead of Cole Jericho straight up. You're going that direction. Seems like Wardlow and Luchasaurus that I could see being held off for the pay-per-view as opposed to television as well.
Do we have a trios program being built right now?
Not exactly.
Right. Well, they could always announce something. Yeah, I'm guessing they're doing a lot on Rampage. And then we got the tag teams, FTR versus Lethal and Jarrett.
Yeah, which you could always. The tag division is always one where you could imagine multiple teams in, or you just go the straight up tag direction for that. So those are some of your.
Maybe the Taya thing will continue. I don't know. Maybe they will do a match where like she's not shackled without not doing the move, and maybe Jade gets that program because it would be awfully fast to just extend.
I would feel you would want to get one more out of that with but Yeah, those are sort of your top programs. Let's go on and see what everyone had to say about tonight's Dynamite. We can do some super chats if you want to throw any in, and we have plenty of feedback here on the forum.
Yeah. First, I want to thank Venom Lion for becoming a new member of our YouTube channel. Of course, if you want to join our Post Wrestling Cafe video version, you can always do that at video.postwrestling.com. So welcome to the channel, Venom Lion. This super chat comes to us from Big Time Baxter, who says, if SmackDown goes to streaming, could Raw and NXT face some ripple effects as a result of lesser eyes to promote the brands while facing declining homes?
As a theoretical, if you were taking SmackDown to a streamer, I think you could see some of that. I don't know if it's necessarily. I don't think it would be that pronounced. I would say with Raw and NXT, what you would be facing is the state of the USA Network, and if it can, like, they're in roughly 73 million homes at the moment. Like, what is like the level that USA is going to fall to over this next contract? I think that is going to have a much more pronounced effect rather than having a network outlet to promote your other shows. But it's a question worth asking.
I mean, this question is essentially asking, what has SmackDown being on Fox provided the WWE?
Well, I would say it's more, in my sense, just directly to SmackDown, in that here is one show that, regardless of your subscriptions that you have or your cable, if you don't have cable, like, here is one 2-hour wrestling program that you have access to and does not require a cable subscription, and it can access people that you can't on cable and you can't on your streaming platform. So I would look at that as the value. And as we have seen, when they have built up things that they're, well, SmackDown, there's been weeks that it has done really well when you have something big like the Bray Wyatt debut, or some of the recent episodes this year when you've had a big bloodline story of where things can go. And for its performance, it is many weeks the number one show, sometimes on television on Fridays.
Right. Yeah. Let's go to forum.postwrestling.com, where our Patreon patrons can always leave their feedback. Shall
Matthew.
I start? Oh, you
Okay.
start, John. Yeah.
Matthew writes, Excalibur is a legend for his ability to do those match announcements for the next shows. It was nice to see the TBS champion on TBS, and the title was defended, no less. Nice to see someone woke Arn up from his nap to come out for that promo. Takeshita is going to be a big star, probably sooner than later.
What is the Arn napping comment supposed to mean?
I don't know. I thought Arn was, I liked Arn's promo.
Okay, let's go to Tim from LA, who says, tonight's Dynamite had some really spectacular moments on it. Orange Cassidy continues to elevate the international championship and make it the most relevant it's ever been. His match with Bandido tonight was my match of the night. Having Roderick Strong debut in such shocking fashion was great. And I love that Tony Khan decided to go with his ROH theme, which is what Killswitch Engage, I believe. I definitely would be down for some trios matches between BCC, the Elite, House of Black, JAS, and Cole Strong and O'Reilly when the latter is back and fully healthy. I think that it is only inevitable that it'll most likely be Chris Statlander that defeats Jade for the TBS championship. Overall, tonight's Dynamite was a solid 8 out of 10.
We go on to Chris from South Bend. I thought tonight's show was kind of a return to what I love most about AEW, and that is the in-ring action. Orange and Candido was a personal highlight, and I screamed like a banshee for Roderick Strong. Some good angles mixed in to accentuate the matches. Good show.
But a Megan who says, a couple lame finishes that marred an otherwise solid Dynamite. First, the 4-way world title match was always the goal, but it took an overbooked path to get there, and next week's Pillars tag points even more in that direction. Jade and Taya was burned through on television, and I'd like to think a rematch is forthcoming for Double or Nothing, because if Statlander isn't ready by next month, have Jade lose to Taya. The most newsworthy part was Roderick Strong showing up, and for once, it was kept under wraps. I should have caught that kill switch joint sooner.
To Kate from Montreal, Orange Cassidy is having an excellent title run and has become one of the highlights of AEW programming. That makes it all the more remarkable that people will also cheer for Bandido during their match. If you can get the crowd into it while you're fighting one of the most adored baby faces, you can go far. I'm hoping more than ever that Kyle O'Reilly is healing well, because Undisputed Era 2.0 would be a great addition to the Trios division. A fun episode, but now I want pickles. So a converted purchaser is Kate from Montreal for this MJF brand of pickles.
This one comes to us from Zubin. and I hope I pronounced that right because I've been trying. Zubin says, "Evening, gents. Wild end to the show tonight. On a slightly unrelated note, should Bushi join AEW? To what extent do you foresee his storylines with Omega drawing on their Golden Lovers history, especially the homosexual aspects? I'm curious if AEW and Tony would shy away or lean into them. Thanks for the hard work." Well, I mean, I don't know how pronounced, like, maybe the homoeroticism ever was. I certainly don't think they shied away from it, but at least, like, I'm talking about the New Japan iteration. I guess he shouldn't feel weird about it, right? But I don't know what, like, is sort of taboo for broadcasters. I don't think any of it should be taboo. If I'm Tony, I would say absolutely yes. Like, that was one of the most interesting aspects of that particular tag team, was the fact that, like, you saw some, like, like, great representation of what might have been lovers, or they might have just been really good friends. I think you'll probably see something similar in AEW.
And the last one goes to Jake from the Windy City. This was a better Dynamite than last week's for me. We had a variety of presentations of wrestling with each match. Seems like the four-way MJF told us wasn't happening will be. Roderick Strong was a surprise and a welcome one to me as an old ROH fan. Cassidy and Bandido becoming best friends is something I'm here for. Finally, this has to be an all-timer for Excalibur. He probably needs an oxygen mask after that. I'm truly looking forward to Dark Side of the Ring this year, with the exception of Bash at the Beach, that will probably have Russo and his BS infected in it. That Magnum TA episode will be heartbreaking and inspiring. To think he was on a trajectory to be one of the biggest stars in wrestling, pretty much Flair and Dusty-like level of star, if it wasn't for the crash. How much he has overcome his biggest obstacles will be emotional to watch. Yeah, I'm sure that one will be a very well done episode on one Terry Allen. But yes, that is all coming up this season on Dark Side of the Ring. So thanks everybody for tuning in tonight to Rewind-A-Dynamite. And this coffee has done wonders for this show. So I'm going to go run some laps or maybe paint my house. I don't know what I'm going to do for the next few hours. What are you up to tonight, Wai?
I'll be watching the Cruiserweight Classic Finals.
Oh boy. I actually watched that one too far ahead. I almost have to go back and check what I watched like a week and a half ago. But yes, next week on Rewind Away, we are chatting the Cruiserweight Classic Finals, and we are flying in Bruce Lord to review the show with us in person in Toronto. So look out for that.
Cruiserweight Classic.
Oh,
sorry.
No, let's all listen to Paul Levesque reminding us of the Cruiserweight Classic and Kota Ibushi in WWE.
Yeah, that's it. No, we're talking about Kota Ibushi. I mean, this was a pretty landmark tournament, so we'll talk a bit more about it on Monday, I'm sure. But I'm excited for Bruce Lord being in town.
That's right. And from tonight's Dynamite main event to the Cruiserweight Classic, you've got Bryan Danielson on commentary. So
that's it.
More of that to look forward to. So that's next week. But in the immediate future, Thursday, postwrestlingcafe.com, it is the latest edition of Talk, as Wai and I will go into many topics that you are not going to hear on this show. And then Friday night, we're back at 10 Eastern, right after the draft, the WWE draft, not the NFL one. And we will be chatting about everything that goes down on SmackDown. And this weekend, new Long and Winding Royal Road with WH Park, and Dylan Fox is with him this Saturday. WrestleNomics on Sunday, and lots to look forward to. So that is it for us. For Wai, I am John, and thank you for tuning in to Rewind-A-Dynamite.